Hello and welcome to the White Witch podcast with me, Carly. Hope you are all well, witches. On today's episode, I am so honoured to have my very good friend Savannah coming on to talk to us all about the Cailleach. Savannah works with the Cailleach, she lives in Scotland and has grown up with the tales of Scotland and the Cailleach being passed down from her ancestors. She has the best accent, great sense of humour, and I really think you'll enjoy this interview. Before we get into the podcast today, I just wanted to let you know about another podcast I am co-host on called the Hedge Witch's Almanac. We've already recorded a year's worth of episodes with an episode for each Sabbath. But now the full wheel has turned, we are now releasing a mini episode for each week that will be released on a Wednesday. We've just released an episode all about the wolf as a power animal. And the format is each week we will either look at a power animal, crystal, tree, or plant. I will put a link in the show notes if you would like to listen to that. It is a very Scottish episode today. For today's book review, I'm veering off track a little bit with a supernatural horror book I read recently that's set in Scotland. There are a few nods to the craft and also Samhain. Makes it the perfect book to read as we delve into the darker months. And I don't know about you, would be a great book to read at Yule. I think Yule is always a good time to read a good ghost story. The book is Pine by Francine Toon. I will read you the blurb just to give you some insight into the storyline. Lauren and her father Neil live alone in the Highlands, in a small village surrounded by forest. When a woman stumbles onto the road one Halloween night, Neil drives her back to their house. In the morning, she's gone. In a community where daughters rebel and men quietly rage, mysteries like these are not out of the ordinary. Lauren looks for answers in her tarot cards, hoping she might be able to read her father's turbulent mind. Neighbours know more than they let on, but when a local teenager goes missing, it's no longer clear who she can trust. First off, the opening of the book just got me. The book is led mainly from the perspective of Lauren, who is 9.5 years old. The half, of course, being very important to Lauren, and we find her in the car with her dad going out for guising for Halloween. So they're on the road, driving through the forest, out in the Highlands. She's clutching her pumpkin-shaped bucket in her full fancy dress. Now, Lauren is an adorable little girl. Her dad's really into music, so when he's not heavily drinking, he plays in a band, and he really influences a lot of her musical taste. So at Halloween, we see her guising, and she is singing Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell to entertain all the neighbours, and they just really aren't into it, and it really cracks me up, the scenes with her singing. The lipstick that Lauren wears as blood on the corner of her mouth for dressing up, we discover, comes from her mother's things following her mother passing. Her father isn't doing well caring for Lauren and grieving and working, and we see this throughout the book, from the state of the house they are living in to him generally not functioning well with work and everything. Lauren's struggling at school, she's being bullied, generally having to look after herself a lot because her dad isn't doing well. It sounds really bleak, but I really took to this book. So, classed as a gothic thriller, the scene was really set in regards to it being eerie and spooky, totally atmospheric. One night I even had to have a little nightlight on after fully scaring myself. I think reading a horror rather than watching one can be more terrifying as your imagination works overtime. I loved the scene being set in the Highlands. The scenes with the house also were terrifying. And for much of the book, I couldn't fathom how the story was going to pan out at all, which kept me hooked. The ending has got some stick in reviews I have seen as being played out too fast. I wouldn't say I agreed with that. I did feel there were perhaps some holes in the plot towards the end. But to be honest, I didn't really care by then. The ending has surprised and terrified me in a good way. It was darker than I could have expected, and I was already scared, and that's what I'd come here for. Absolutely love this book. It's easy to read. I must have charged through it in about 2 days, desperate to see what had happened. But yes, it was definitely extremely haunting. Join me after the break when we talk all about the Cailleach. Welcome back. So I am here with my wonderful friend Savannah. Hello, Savannah.
Hey, hon, how you doing?
I'm so good. I'm so excited that you're coming on. I can't wait for everyone to hear all about you and everything we're going to talk about. Honestly, so excited for this.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a real honour to be asked on. Honestly, it's a real honour.
Oh, so Savannah, or the Scottish Witch Queen, as I like to call her, we met online through all things witchy and just got on like a house on fire instantaneously. Yep. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was like love at first sight.
It was, my pupils dilated and everything. It was absolute love at first sight. We have talked in depth about, I mean, everything under the sun, all things, but of course, many witchy things, including a shared love of quite a few different aspects of the craft. Mm-hmm. We have obviously been talking about like Scottish folk magic, witchcraft overall, ghostly experiences, the Cailleach, she's going to tell me off because I never pronounced it properly, of which Savannah has so much knowledge of. Savannah kindly sent me a ton of information on the Cailleach because I wanted to get into it, but she sent me so much and it was so good. I felt it has to be Savannah delivering this. She absolutely needs to take the credit for all of this amazing information. She's the one with all the wisdom on her, and who better than to deliver this on the podcast than Savannah with her gorgeous Scottish accent.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So I'm hoping after I can ask you a couple of extra questions, if you don't mind as well, Savannah.
Not a problem.
Yeah. So you're going to absolutely love all Savannah has to talk about on this episode, as much as I do, I'm sure. Savannah, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Oh gosh, okay. So the Cailleach has honestly, she's got so many ways to pronounce her name. And like, yeah, you kind of murder her name a little bit, but you love her just as much. So I'll let you off because honestly, I don't think it's all about the pronunciation of her name. I think it's how we connect with something. So I believe that you could call her whatever you want. So I call her the Cailleach, but obviously there's hundreds and hundreds of different ways to pronounce her name, and I think just whatever you connect with, you call her. So the Cailleach is she's, to me, she is like an ancient Scottish spirit. She's known as a goddess, which is totally fine, but I kind of see her as the Cailleach as she is the mother of all gods and goddesses. She's that old. So let me explain. The Cailleach I'm going to talk about is Cailleach Baira. So you get lots of different Cailleachs in Scotland. They've all got different names. You've got Baira, my apologies. You've got Cailleach Nessa. You've got, honestly, there's hundreds. So they're known as lesser Cailleachs or her children. But the main kahuna, the big gun, is the Cailleach Baira. And she's Dark Baira, Queen of Winter. She is the mother of all gods. And basically, she is who created everything in Scotland. And the whole British Isles as well, because she's been found in all corners, Ireland especially, and even down south in England, she's been found. So she's known as the Veiled One. She's known as a woman with second sight. She basically, the story of her is that she was a giant. She was absolutely huge, and I kind of liken it to. So have you ever seen The Craft?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So you know how in The Craft they talk about Manol, and Manol is like if God and the devil were playing football in the football pitch, it was Manol that created all that. That's how I see the Cailleach. She is all encompassing. She created absolutely everything. So there's loads of stories of her origin stories that they vary from wherever you live in Scotland, the UK, wherever. So the one that I kind of like is that she was a giant, and she would carry boulders in her peenie, which is a Scottish word for an apron. And basically she was a bad-tempered, ill-nittered old shite. And she would drop the boulders willy-nilly, like being pissed off at the world. And these boulders, when they dropped, created our glens, our valleys, our mountains. They created absolutely everything. But then the story kind of changed later on that it was the devil that done that. Now, I smell bullshit. Could you imagine the devil running about in a peenie, dropping boulders willy-nilly? I didn't think so. So I think it was used by the Christians to kind of just blank out all of the mythology of Celtic mythology, Pictish mythology, but she's kind of put in with the Celts and Celt gods and goddesses, but I think she's way more ancient than that. Way more ancient. She's basically been seen like in mythology going far back as the Pictish times, like way back. She's very ancient. She's ageless. She's got
a kind of Gaia like aspect to her in a sense, hasn't she? Am I right on that? Like almost the creator, like Gaia type
100%,
sense around her.
Yeah. So I think because I think of some of the Cailleachs as goddesses now, it does get a bit confusing because there's all these different kind of they're known as the lesser Cailleach, but different mythologies say different things. That's just personally what I believe. But because she created the gods and the goddesses, I kind of see her as more powerful than that. So that's why I see her more as a spirit. She's like the essence of creation. She was also like, because her strength is the winter time, and then she starts to wane around the first spring. So there's like an old kind of folklore story. Do you want me to tell it?
Oh, please. I love you too.
Okay. I'm a waffler, so if I start waffling, you have to rein me in because
you're in the right place. Everyone's used to waffling on this podcast with me, so you go for it, Savannah. Don't you worry. Like,
I'm glad because I am a waffler, and I thought I'm not going to have notes. I'm going to do it, and I'm now wishing I had bullet points in front of me because things are popping into my head. I'm probably the most disorganized person ever. So basically, one of the old legends is that Baira, the ancient Cailleach, she reigned winter for centuries, like a millennia. Think of the old Snow Queen in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That sort of vibe. Everything was winter. And she had hundreds of children, like, because she created them all, basically. And they started to get annoyed at her because they were freezing their tits off, basically. So they started to rebel. So they started to rebel a little bit. And let me just see if I can remember the name. Gosh, I'm terrible. So basically, the goddess bride and her husband, they rebelled against her. And what they did was they kind of overthrew her, and she came to some sort of, this is like the shortened version, she came kind of an agreement that bride and her husband, I'm sure his name was Angus something. Gosh, why can't I remember her name? Sorry, my apologies.
No, don't worry.
I'm just trying to think. Anyway, it'll come to me. We'll get to the end of the podcast and be like, that's his name. I remember it now.
We just insert it after. A little voiceover of Frank.
So basically, bride and her husband, I think it was Angus something or other, it will come to me, and you could add it to the show notes after if I don't. They started to rule the summer, and the people loved bride and her husband because they were warm, that the crops would grow and all the rest of it. So, but they agreed that Byra would come back at winter, and when she did, she would come back even more powerful. But she was also known as like the midwife of the winter, because she would nurture the seeds that were in the ground. So she would nurture them all. She would be maternal towards them. She was also very in tune with the animals. She was said to always have a herd of deer follow her all the time. But in the summer, see, I digress, in the summer, the first day of spring, the Cailleach Byra would find her way to the Green Isle. Now, this is a legendary island that floats around off the coast of Scotland. No mortal has ever stepped foot on this, and sailors and all the rest of it have said that they've seen this beautiful Green Isle and then it disappears. But this is where the Cailleach Byra is said to have gone in the spring, and what she'll do is she'll drink from the fountain of youth, and she'll turn back into the most beautiful, gorgeous woman ever. Then she'll roam about the Scottish Isles, having a look at all her land, seeing what's been done. She'll deal with injustices, but she's kind of guised as a beautiful woman. So if people are over hunting the deer, for example, and not taking what they need, she'll punish them. So you could say that just now in today's climate, because we're all completely just disregarding Mother Nature, we're having heavy weathers and ridiculous freak storms all over the world, fires, all the rest of it. So it could be seen as the Cailleach Byra, like punishing us sort of thing. So in days gone by, they would, the mortal people, the normal kind of people, they would worship her and they would leave offerings for her so that Byra would leave them alone and give them a good crop, basically. But as the
Savannah,
summer,
you know what? I was so sorry to cut you. I was just going to ask you. This is fascinating to me. I just want to ask you two questions before we move forward. It's really fascinating about the deer association, because it is that almost like the matriarchal kind of, well, not, I don't want to say goddess, but you know, the reverence of like the female spirits of, and they're always ancient, like any of the deities or spirits linked to the deers also, like, so I'm kind of getting that really, really ancient sense with that. It's really funny you said about the Green Isle as well, because there actually is, and this is something I'd like to talk about one day, but there's a podcast called, brilliant podcast called Real Life Ghost Stories, and she talked about the Green Isle, and she was saying the same about the sailors seeing it, and also a few pilots, and it just popping up out of nowhere, and then just to be disappear and never be seen again. But it's like fascinating, like genuinely.
It's so cool.
It's
so cool. I love, honestly, see, when you immerse yourself in this kind of mythology, and then you go about the normal world and the muggle life, you're like, oh gosh, I really wish. Really want to be a Celt. It's so bad.
Exactly. Sorry, I just had to interrupt, but yeah, if I can find that podcast episode, I'll link it into the show notes, because it's really worth listening to, just about the Green Isle itself. But I didn't know that she was said to reside there. So all of this is, and you know, like, give us all the little details you got, because I know you said about the deer thing. Like, please just throw them in. We're here for it.
Well, basically, she would go there. There was also a rumor that she had to drink from this fountain before the sun kind of came up in the sky, and before the first chirp of the first bird in the morning. If she didn't drink the water by then, she was said to turn to ash. But luckily she always got there first, because she ain't no stupid woman. you know. But as the kind of summer would roll on, she would age very, very quickly. So by the first kind of signs of autumn, she would have a heavy wrinkled brow. She would look old, and then by the first stages of winter, her skin would have turned back dark blue, kind of like a frozen corpse. She had one eye. Her head, she wore a dark shawl, a bonnet. She looked like kind of the Baba Yaga, kind of that kind of visual image, that kind of vibe, you know. So then it would all kind of go in circles. Like then she would rule all of winter, rule it. I always kind of know when she's getting close, when you go outside and you see the first breath when it's cold outside. I'm like, oh, she's coming back. That's it. She's coming back. And I will always do an altar to her. I've got an altar to the Cailleach. I've got a whole book of shadows dedicated to her. I'm trying to learn Scottish Gaelic, or Gaelic. I'm trying to learn it. I don't know if it's Gaelic or Gaelic. One's Irish, one's Scottish. I still get them muddled up, even though I've completely immersed myself in the whole language. You know,
what I love with Savannah is when you're going through something, she will send you like this, like, she'll send me a text message, and it's like a Gaelic like poem, or kind of like some words she's put together, and it's so magic. And she just puts these together from the Gaelic that she knows, and I like read it, and I'm like, yeah, I can barely put a sentence together. Honestly, she's like, Savannah is like an ancient. You are like an ancient soul. Like, you are so fun. You're so like young heart, but you've got such an ancient soul. Like, and I absolutely love it. So sorry, I'm interrupting you again.
No, it's all right. I think it's super important that we learn about our culture and our heritage, and it's really important to me, because if we don't carry on with these stories, then they're lost in time. And a lot of these stories were never written down, they were verbally communicated, you know, and they were changed and altered as the years went by because of different religions, different beliefs. I like to kind of think a lot of the time men would manipulate it, you know, to try and dominate, because in these days women were like revered as goddesses because we were the givers of life, you know. But things sort of changed a little bit, and then you get into the whole witch burnings, but that's a whole different rabbit hole to go down. I could talk for hours about that, but I'll I'll go back to what I was talking about. So I want to kind of mention a little bit about the lesser Cailleachs. Now, some say they were her daughters, some say they were kind of her maids, or her, you know, like her maids. And then, but I sometimes think, this is just my personal opinion, that it was like different aspects of her personality, maybe, you know.
Like Morrigan, I guess there's like 3 versions of her, and they're all very different in terms of maybe in that similar sense. I get what you mean.
So I kind of see it like that. But there's a story of how Loch Ness came about in Scotland. So it was said that the Cailleach Baira was sitting on Ben Nevis, and she was sitting looking over Scotland and looking at her lands, and she seen the Cailleach Nessa, and the Cailleach Nessa was coming up Ben Nevis, and she said to her, she was like, I'm really thirsty. Go to this drinking well and bring me up water. I want a drink. So the Cailleach Nessa, the lesser Cailleach, her daughter or maid, whatever you want to call her, went tumbling down and tried to get her water. But the water flow was so strong that she couldn't put the lid back on the well. And the Cailleach Nessa freaked out and she bolted. But obviously Baira had been watching this from where she was sitting and was really angry. So she boomed across all the land that, Nessa, you have let me down big time. As punishment, you will be running forever, and you'll forever be in water. And that is, she turned her into the River Ness and the Loch Ness. And that is how the origin story of the Loch Ness came about. And it's said that every year, when the Cailleach Nessa was turned into the Loch Ness, that she'll transform and she'll come out of the loch for a couple of hours on this night, and she'll sing the saddest song, the most saddest lament ever, that it'll bring a tear to your eye, just about her sorrows. And then she'll go back into the water. And obviously there's the Loch Ness monster as well, which I believe is a Kelpie spirit, and who's a protector of the loch. And yeah, so that's how the origin story of the Cailleach Nessa and how Loch Ness, that's the origin
I love
story.
that.
Yeah,
I've never heard that. I absolutely love that. Honestly, that's brilliant.
There's also other stories like if you're ever in Scotland and you're hill walking, you'll notice that there is massive boulders all about the place, like just random big ass stones, and it's like, how the hell did they get there? So the origin story of that is that the Cailleach Baira, she had hundreds of kids. She was a bit of a floozy. So she gave birth, and she had a lot of sons who were giants. And giants, being quite pig-headed, aggressive, they would fight all the time. So the Cailleach Baira was like, you are going to ruin my land if you continue with your bullshit. So she created different kind of stone houses for them, so also almost like mountains, and told each giant, you live on your own space and stop your bullshit, basically. But that never stopped them, because they're giants, they're full of testosterone, so they would lob stones at each other. So when they were lobbing the stones, they would land in random places, and that's the origin story of how Scotland is full of random big boulders all about the place. So yeah, that's another story. So this
is what I love. Like, so with all these tales, Savannah, like one thing I always love about Scotland and Ireland is that sorry, I'm like clubbing you in together, but there's so much held like they're still so revered, like all the old stories. And I always feel like it seems like people pass them down more throughout the family lineage still, and it's still so strong. So with you, like, did you get, sorry, I'm like interrupting you again, but I'm really curious, okay. When you were growing up, like, did you hear all these stories from family, or like, because I know you had a lot that you picked up along the way, but I just was really curious if they've sort of been passed down to you.
Absolutely. So my gran and my great granny's husband, we called them Pop, they were amazing storytellers, and we would be told, me and my sister would be told all these magical stories about mermaids, and about horses that would turn, like the Kelpies, and like, but she would tell them as bedtime stories, and they were phenomenal. And like, when you're younger, you just kind of see them as stories, but now growing up, I'm like reading like stories, and I'm like, I already knew that, and it's like, oh my goodness, of course, it's something that's always kind of been ingrained in me. And for example, like if there was a storm, like a big boomy storm, my granny would be like, oh God, that's the Cailleach. Storming down that hill. She said, you better we better please her. So we would take out boiled sweeties out into the garden, and I'd be like, boiled sweeties? She's like, oh, every old lady likes a boiled sweetie head.
I love that so much. So there must be like an old ancient there must be like an old ancient male spirit somewhere that someone's out feeding Werther's originals to as an offering.
Absolutely. We'll just need to kind of find them and hook them up together. 100%. But
I absolutely love that.
So just it becomes like then when I had my daughter and son, I would tell them stories, the same stories as that my gran would tell me, but then I would add my own wee kind of flair onto it. And I presume that is exactly how these mythology stories started. They would be in their tribe, they would want to be doing dedications to the gods and the goddesses for their crops not to burn, for them to have like a good harvest, because back then that's basically we didn't revolve around a clock. We revolved around the earth times. And I think that's what's missing from life now. We're so obsessed with the clock, the 24-hour clock, that we don't listen to nature anymore. We don't listen to what the earth outside is telling us. And I think back then, that's exactly how they would live. And so they were so in tune to all these different things, you know. And that's kind of this journey I've been on in the last year. I mean, I've really thrown myself into finding out about my heritage, finding out about my mythology, all of that. But I'm trying to be more in tune to the earth's natural cycle instead of thinking, oh shit, it's 2:00. I need to, you know what I mean? I'm really trying to focus in on that. And it's kind of what our ancestors did. So I'm trying to live that. One day I will live in a little yurt in the middle of the forest. My dream is to have a loch in front of me and the forest behind me on a hill somewhere.
I'll live just up the way. I'll be just up the way then. Like,
we'll be all spinsters together.
Exactly. But I think you're so right. And I think this is even something, because obviously we talk a lot about, folklore on the podcast. And even with my daughter, I'm always one in the family that's always wanted to talk about the family stories. And like, I think they always thought, like, she's so weird. Like, why is she living in the past? She always wants to talk about our ancestors. And I've always been obsessed with all of our family stories. It can go as deep as you want. You can start, I think it's really important to pass on not only the family stories, because your kids do want to know these things. Like, my daughter's always in awe when we talk about stories of, there's always little tales in families. Some of them you don't want to divulge, I'm not gonna lie, but there are some that you're like, this is something that needs to be held on to and passed down. And I do think that we are losing that, and it is a shame. But once you start, like you say, like looking into your lineage, you can go back and back, and it's so fascinating, like how far back you can go, and how then it all links into more of your heritage stories as well. It kind of but it really makes you feel connected. And if you are someone, because I've been doing a lot more ancestral work, especially in regards to psychic work, like trying to work with my ancestors and stuff. And I found that really powerful, and like felt really connected through that as part of that work. But I just find, I bet your kids absolutely love you telling them all the legends and all the stories of these like this. I'm waffling now, sorry.
No, but you're right, and that's exactly it. But we need to kind of keep that alive. But now we're in an age where you could Google anything, and it's a great resource going online and all the rest of it, especially for, I think, newbies in the craft, like what they call witchlings. Such a cute name. I'm a well-seasoned old crone, shall we say. But I was very lucky that I could rely on family and for that sort of thing. But growing up, it was never kind of seen as witchcraft at all. It really was. It was like old wives' tales, They would never call themselves witches, but they 100% were. There was like wee things that they would do, like have certain herbs out over the front door for good luck, putting keys in the evil eye above the door, to ward away evil spirit. There was all these kind of wee things that was just part of life that I didn't know what it was called until the 90s, and I watched like The Craft, and I was like, holy shit, that's kind of what we do. Because it was just part of and then I was like, oh no, I really want to kind of get into this, the ritual side and that. But I'll tell you something which folk find quite strange about me, is that I've only ever cast one spell in my life.
I don't think that's I to be honest, I am not a huge caster of spells. I do cast them, but it has to be something major. Major.
I think if that was one advice I could give to folk new to the craft, is don't just turn a spell. I think that's a very, very, very last resort, because you are messing with energies. You are, and if it's like when you first pass your driving test, you wouldn't get in a Lamborghini Ferrari and whiz off. You start kind of, and then kind of build up to that kind of And I just think everybody's different. I do a lot of rituals, 100%. I do a lot of spiritual work. I'll cast circles and I'll sit in there and meditate and I'll get out in nature. But actually casting a spell, I've only ever done it once, and it was to pass my driving test.
Oh my God, I love this, honestly. You know what? I think with me, I find that I think most of my work is ritual work, energy work, and journeying and meditating, because in a way that all does go towards some form of magic. It is still all kind of some energy manipulation.
Yeah.
But when you get super specific, I find spell work really, really like takes it out of me. Like it's so intense. And I just, and I don't genuinely have many things come up that I'm like, oh, I'm going to gear myself up for that, because it really, really like drains me. But you know, each to their own. So I know what you're saying. So I've got friends that will do like spells for small things, but it's only because with me, I'm like, if I'm going to do it, I'm like, you know, there at the strike of midnight in an all black cloak and everything, you know,
that's
like
me.
intense. And I'm like, but then to be honest, a lot of the, I guess as well, like a lot of the folk magic and a lot of that was very often like simples and little forms of magic. It wasn't always like a big ritual or a big spell. It was always little superstitions and little things that we did that were seen as little versions of spells, if that makes 100%. Sense. You know, they just weren't grandiose. But I don't want to interrupt, because I know you've got tons you're going to share with us, but in regards to like the Cailleach and with the like Book of Shadows that you have and the work you do, so are you like, and I'm interjecting, I'm like throwing this at you, what do you do in regards to working with her? Are there any things that maybe you do, like any times of the year that you specifically really have in honor of her, or things you have on your altar, anything along those lines?
So I kind of connect her through everything earthy. So I will have a hag stone, so the stone with a natural hole in it. Please don't buy them online. Please don't. You have to kind of find them to make them, I think anyway. So a hag stone. I will do it on Yule. So what I like to do is I like to build a fire outside. I'll just go out and I'll kind of think about it, and I like to do things skyclad, totally scudders. I feel that it's the best way, and I'll just kind of sit and I'll meditate to her. I'll try and be as silent as possible. If I can get away up into the hills and near water, I will. Obviously, I won't go skyclad for that. I'd get arrested. But I do like to take my shoes off and just feel the earth beneath me, and it's just about kind of connecting with her. So I'll write in my Book of Shadows how I'm feeling, how I'm feeling, how I want to kind of move forward with my life, kind of putting on her mentality, because I believe she had a bit of a sense of humour. She was a strong woman. Like, I don't think she's the woman that there's always one, you know, like the old lady in the shop, and she's like, shut up, you fucking shite. Ken, she's that woman. She's not polite. She's very
That's
forward.
My nan.
It's everybody's nan, isn't it?
Yes.
It's just having that energy. But with regards to ritual work with her, I will get out in nature and I will journal, and I'll just think things that I'll have on my altar will be moss, stones. I'll collect kind of rainwater and I'll have that in a bowl on my altar. Stones, but more not kind of like amethyst or anything, like stones, pebbles that I've found. There's a ritual that I like to do. It's not my own ritual. I didn't create this. It's a ritual that I've seen online, but I think it's very apt with her. Is that to kind of get rid of your worries and your anxieties, because we as women, men as well, I mean, I shouldn't just say women, that's not fair. We're very hard on ourselves. Like 100 people could say, oh, Savannah, you are looking beautiful, but that one person says that horrible thing, or you're looking a bit chubby, and that's what you focus on.
God, yeah.
You know,
genuinely, I've just had a week of this. I had like, sorry, Savannah, to cut you. I've had this week. I've had like, honestly, and I think I just want to sort of say this as well, because I think it's something I wanted to talk to you about, just one of our little chats. I had I was really nervous about coming back to putting the podcast out. So I'm recording this as the first episode of the podcast has gone out. And I'll be honest, like, I think we all have this, that we'll have so many people that are kind to us, that are nice. And then I had 2 people troll me in the space of a week. And I'm just so sensitive, and I'm always getting told like, oh, you need to toughen up and you're this. Why do we focus on that one person when we have all these other lovely people? And I put myself up for a whole day of like hesitating on doing what I wanted to do, because I was like upset. And I'm just like, why? Like, these people, it's not normal to go around hurting people and being unkind, you know. So I'm just thought I'd say that it's a theme.
Well, this kind of ritual will help with that kind of anxiety. So what you do is you collect pebbles, as many pebbles as you want. 12, you shouldn't need any more than 12. So there's no real symbology when it comes to like the Cailleach. You know how you get different kind of symbols for different deities and all that. There isn't really one for her, but the spiral, you know, the spiral kind of sign, that's associated with her, you know. And to me, it kind of symbolizes rebirth, because she's on a constant cycle, you know. So that symbolizes rebirth, continuation, and all the rest of it. So what you want to do is you want to cast your circle. You want to ground and center, always ground and center before you cast your circle. And how I ground and center is I never wear shoes, never ever. And I try and do as many as I can outside. But if you can't, that's totally fine. But when you're grounded and centered, just imagine your feet are roots of a tree going right deep into the earth's core and kind of gripping on there, you know, so nothing can move you. You're as solid as a tree. Cast your circle. Kind of think about the Cailleach or whatever ancient spirit, you, goddess, God, whatever that you kind of connect with. Call your corners, you know, and I would put, I always kind of put I need a compass. I am terrible. I would not make a good homing pigeon. I walk into a shop and forget what door I've come out and get lost all the time. I mean, so I need visual representation so I know where I am, so I don't get lost. So I have
I have to have a compass for this.
Me too, because I'm like, what? So I have I get different coloured candles, and I kind of make my own candles out of beeswax. So just rolling them, it's super simple. And I think as much as you can do by yourself and create, your energies are going into that. So call your corners. Then what I would do is go into the middle of your circle, and I kind of put down a bowl of water. Now it could be rainwater, purified water from a loch, lake, river, whatever you want. I just always kind of use that. Then I'll start at the centre and I'll walk, making the spiral shape, and I'll drop the pebbles, kind of symbolising the Cailleach dropping the boulders, creating Scotland, the UK, whatever. I'm kind of possessive of her. I shouldn't say that, because she's all over the UK. She's not just Scottish. So that's the representation of that. And every pebble that I drop is a negative thought that I'm releasing, you know. So so every pebble dropped, you're kind of thinking, getting rid of that negative thought. And think about your wording as well. Like, even just trying, not, what am I trying to say here? Instead of saying, oh, I'm so ugly, just say, I like ugliness gone, or, you know, kind of your thoughts, that sort of idea. Am I making sense, or am I waffling here?
Yeah, like trying not to kind of associate yourself with that negative thought, you know, like kind of attaching to you, but getting rid of it in a way that you're wording it healthily, so you're not adopting that identity in a sense.
So your subconscious mind isn't connecting to the negative aspect, and then it stays with you. So you would do that, going right round, making the semicircle, making the spiral, sorry. And then when you've finished, just I like to just sit and reflect. I'll scatter boiled sweets, always leave a wee offer in. Like, anywhere I go in Scotland, I'll have like seeds and nuts. So anywhere I go, I'll leave a little offering of something, you know, just because you don't know what energy ley lines you're walking in. And there's, you know, we just go through willy-nilly. So I always like to just bring some in. So when I'm dealing with the Cailleach, I always bring boiled sweets, but it could be bread or whatever. You know, that's just something silly I do. And then just think about that. I do this ritual outside on a beach normally, and I will, after I have closed down the circle, thanked everything for being there, thanked the Cailleach for being there. I do have words for this. I think I sent you them. You could even, if someone wants to do this, I could write it out step by step if they want. So for their Book of Shadows, I'm more than happy to do that. And then when you release it, I then just leave the stones or just kick them away. You don't want to be taking these stones home with you. So if you're doing this ritual inside, I would, at the end of it, scoop up the pebbles and bury them. Bury them away from your home. Get rid of them, you know, because that's that negativity gone. And as like time passes, if you start to feel those creeping negative thoughts pop back in, visualize that spiral, visualize the ritual, and just ground and center yourself, and it'll take you back to it. And I find that helps. It's like a visual representation of getting rid of the crap, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I've got the notes from Savannah on this. So if with Savannah's permission, I can happily put the little ritual into the show notes so that people can come back to this and have a go at doing that. But that sounds really good.
100%. I mean, and it doesn't have to be to the Cailleach. That's just who but it can be to any god, anybody, you know. I like to associate with her with the pebbles, you know, because it's the visualization, the representation of her dropping the boulders and creating the land, you know. So that's kind of the way I look at it. But with the Cailleach, she teaches us, well, she's taught me so much. Like, she's taught me like to never fear, that life goes on, you know, let go of the old that holds you back and like move forward. She's taught me to release, work with empathy, love and compassion. Now, although she was a feared spirit, goddess, deity, whatever you want to call her, she was also extremely kind to animals, nature, to the earth. She nurtured the earth. So like in the winter, she would keep a hold of all the seeds and all the rest of it and keep them close to her and nurture them. So in the spring, they would grow into new life. So that's what I mean. But like, she's taught me empathy, work, love and compassion. She's taught me to, whatever you're doing, give it your all, because there was a time when she was kind of overthrown by her own son and daughter, and that's how the seasons came about. But she persevered, she kept going, and she's still good. She's ageless. She's still getting on with it, you know. She was like the queen, just never stopped, just kept going.
Yeah.
You know,
it's really funny because when you connect to her kind of energy, like, you know, we were saying about like negative events, and you know, you focus on the crap that's bad, but you've got all these other good things happening. In a way, it makes me think of those kind of old school, and I know some of this is a little bit like toxic positivity. I was saying to my mum the other day, like, you know, nans and mums, they've always got like some of the best sayings. I said to my mum like the other day, it's a good job we never grew up on your affirmations, mum, because some of my mums were like, life's hard, then you die. And I'm like, oh my God, like, you can't be putting that out into the universe. No. But sometimes some of the grandmas, and like my daughter's dad, his nan used to say, if it ain't death, it ain't shit. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, don't hold back, grandma. Like, no. You know, so sometimes like the crone aspect of like, you know, of like, just I have to remind myself sometimes, like, don't always focus on the shit. Like, they are quite tough when it comes to, she gives you that crone energy of like, don't worry about them. Like, well, don't, you know, just like not toughen up in a toxic positivity way, but it's like they've seen and experienced so much, like that's nothing to them, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
I was going to say, in regards to this time of year, obviously, so the Cailleach always comes up for me because of Samhain, because I don't know if you go by the story and if this ties into the version of the Cailleach that you've been talking about with the staff, which she bangs to signify the crossover from like Samhain night. I don't know if that's the story that you identify with in regards to her. It's just the one that I've always, you know, thought of and known. So I wondered if Samhain was the time you sort of identify as being of hers.
Yeah, I've heard that one. That I've always kind of associated, she is because the Samhain is the end of the year, so she does come across there. I deal with like it's Samhain and that I'm right into ancestral work, and I kind of associate her more, and I do more with her at Yule, but that's just me personally. But she is absolutely associated with that time of year, because this is when she comes to power, because it's the end of the kind of the Celtic New Year. It's the end of the agricultural year. This is when winter starts, you know, the start of November, end of October, start of November. This is, but personally, that on Samhain, I connect with those loved ones that have passed. I'll always have the Cailleach on my altar. Always. I've got images, like, honestly, I'm so sad. I have like a photo album, like, just if I'm ever feeling kind of like, oh, I need a wee bit inner strength, I'll look at these photos of her, artistic photos that I've seen online and all the rest of it, so I'll connect. But yeah, 100%. Now, that was in your book, wasn't it, that you took? Was it Blackberry, the Blackthorn?
Yeah, so I actually talked about her in the recent book we did, but it's funny because I am with you on her being more associated with Yule. Again, I always see her as like, you know, the kind of the snow queen, the winter queen. And then for me, like Yule and going into that part of the year is a time I see more of her, because I always associate, I love Nick Nevin, and she's always who I always like associate her with Samhain. You know, I've got like a lot of Scottish ancestry, nowhere near obviously as like much as Savannah, but that's kind of why a lot of like we started talking a lot, because I've always been obsessed with like Nick Nevin, the Cailleach, and I've always associated Nick Nevin with the night of Samhain. She like rides with the wild hunt and all of that. There's so much around her in relation to that night. So much you've given me today that I love, that is so, it's like those, it's like real like information that just isn't always out there and easy to find, and that's always what I want to try and bring onto the podcast, like the real roots
100%.
of it.
And our handing over to Bridget, her name is also Bride.
Yes, it is. Yeah, definitely. There's like so many variations of her name, isn't there?
Same story, different names, but same vibe, totally. But yeah, I was it Nick Niven? I call it the Nick Niven, you know, but everybody calls her something different. But yes, that's who I associate with Samhain, 100%, absolutely. But I am all for the Cailleach all year round. she's my woman.
Yeah, spirits of life, not just for Christmas. So Savannah, obviously talking of Samhain, with the veil thinning, and obviously this might go out just after Samhain, but I wondered like if you would be happy to share, because obviously one of the conversations amongst the many that we have are often about the spirit world, ghostly encounters and so on. Savannah has got some amazing experiences that she's had, I mean in life in general, but I know you are quite psychic. Are you happy to tell us like definitely the mortuary story, or just any stories on that front that you're happy to share on the podcast?
So I worked in the funeral trade for a long time. I was unfortunately made redundant from the funeral trade after the first lockdown. But before that, my job was working in the mortuary. So I would dress the deceased. I would get the deceased ready for their final journey before the funeral, and I would see it as a great honour to be able to do that for a family. I really did see it as an honour. But there was what I would try and do with every single person that came into my care was I would always do a little blessing for them. I'd always light a little candle and stuff, but then I thought with the kind of certain chemicals that are in a mortuary, I didn't think a candle was a good idea, so I got fake candles because I was worried I'd blow the place up. So as I got more experience, I thought maybe that's not the best idea. So I would have the wee kind of fake candles, but I would always just try and connect to them, and just because I always thought, you know what, I don't think their spirits would almost like be hanging around their deceased body. I think they'd be more with family. But I also like to think that do you know what? If it was me, I'd be like, I want to know exactly what you're doing to me, pal. So I would always be very mindful that they were there, just maybe keeping an eye on. So I would talk to them, but I would always try and see if I could find out anything about their lives by kind of connecting in, do you know? So I would do that. And I was right a lot of the time. I was very wrong a lot of the time too. So, but there was this one experience that I had, and I won't say the names or anything like that, but it was a gentleman, and when I was preparing him, getting him dressed, I just felt like I was very heavy, like someone was sitting on my chest. Like I just felt really, really kind of, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good at all. I felt like I was being watched. I just had this horrible vibe, and I was like, oh, I don't like this. I'm not keen on this person. I am getting really creepy vibes from this whole situation. So the funeral directors I worked for at that time was a small family-run funeral director. So basically, at that time, I would treat the deceased, but I would also help on the funerals. So I would be at the funerals, assisting the lead funeral director. So at this particular funeral, I was there, and where I was positioned at the crematorium, there was the family would be sat next to me, and the son turned round to his mum and went, "Don't worry, mum, in 10 minutes this fucker will be burning and we can have a cup of tea." And I thought, oh my God, that's why I'm like, he was. Then I found out he was horrendous to the family, like really horrendous to the family. And they didn't collect his ashes for years. And the whole time his ashes were there, weird things would happen, like things, I mean, it's crazy, but we had shelves, and they would have on the shelves, we would have like different things for funerals, for going out and collecting deceased from their houses or whatever. And I would come in the morning, and it was a sturdy shelf, and everything would be knocked off the shelf. The radio would go on by, just weird, creepy things. And I would end up saying, like, trying to talk to this individual, going, "Look, mister, leave me alone, move on," basically. And as soon as I kind of got freaked out that much, that I wrote to the family and said, we've still got the ashes here. Would you like to come and collect them, or would you like us to dispose of them for you? They wanted us to dispose of them, so we took them back to the crematorium Remembrance Gardens, and that's where they were scattered. And as soon as them ashes had gone, everything stopped. Now, the people that I worked with, like my boss at the time, he didn't believe in any of that. He had worked in the trade. He started in the trade the year I was born, 1982. So he just didn't believe in it. He thought I was absolutely away with it. He thought it was crazy. But there was all these kind of things, and he would say, when I would try and home in with these individuals, and I'd be like, "Oh, I had got the sense that she was a singer, or she played the piano." He'd be like, "Oh, you've read it, you spoke to the family." He would always kind of poo-poo it. And like the whole thing with this individual that was creepy, like things falling off, he'd be like, "Oh, it'd be the vibrations, or the radio is an electrical thing." I was like, "No, I'm telling you, this guy's haunting the place because he's evil. Get him out," But all that kind of stuff would sort of happen. But I would always try and connect to them in some sort of way, just to try and find out about them, and also like kind of say to them, "Don't worry, what I'm doing here is for the greater good. It's for your family to come in," and I would talk to myself about talking to them while doing it. And a lot of the time I would like to go in like at midnight to prep the deceased, because it was peaceful. I didn't have to worry about the phone ringing. I didn't have to worry about folk coming in and out. And so I quite liked going in and working through the night. Keep a lot of it quiet, but no, I absolutely felt that I connected to these individuals. And even before that, when I would make honestly, I've been like the jack of all trades, master and none, I swear to God. But I've had my own shop before, and I used to make skincare products, and I would do therapies as well, like massage and all the rest of it. So I would make skincare products for the individual skin. So I would kind of give them a facial and say, you need X, Y, and Z, and I'd make it all out of natural ingredients. And while I was doing a lot of these kind of massages, I would have images pop in. It wasn't like someone was standing talking to me. I never heard it. It was like watching a movie in my inside of my mind.
Yeah.
And
that's what I get when I get things
right.
come through. I get a little vision in like, this sounds really bizarre to say, but it always comes into like the right side of my brain. I can't even explain how. It's like I'll see something come up, or if I have a message come through, it's like it's spoken in my right ear almost, or like the right,
it's like a whisper, isn't it?
Head. I can't explain that. Yeah, it's always on the right side for me, and I've never been able to. There's only one other person I spoke to, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, that's exactly where the side I kind of get it through on." I've never been able to explain it properly, but yes, I get visions same of like, I'll like see a little scenery play out, or I'll get a succession of images just like flashing, lots of different things.
That's like and it'll be like it's very hard to explain, but it's like a still movie.
Yeah. Images, like a flicker book almost.
So the most kind of profound experience I've had with that, I was giving a girl a massage. When I had this business before, I was giving her a massage, and I was getting images of a bird of prey, a window, a man and it was like so overpowering. It was the first time it had properly happened to me as an adult. Like, I used to have imaginary friends all the time when I was a kid, and I was talking to dead relatives, but didn't realize I was talking to dead relatives until I was older. Mum was like, that was a bit freaky, because it seemed like you were talking to your great aunt, whoever. Do you know what I mean? I was like, well, but you block that out. So this, going back, this images were flying through my mind, and I had to stop. And the girl was like, what's wrong? And I was like, this is going to sound crazy, and if this is wrong, I'm going to sound like a lunatic. And I was like, I'm seeing a man, and I'm seeing a bird of prey, and I'm seeing it. And I explained to her, and she burst out crying. She was like, my dad died 2 months ago, and he always said that when he died, he would come back as a bird of prey, and I've been seeing a bird of prey outside my bedroom window. And I was like, holy shit! Oh my God! I was like, I couldn't believe that I had been so accurate, because all these things would happen to me in the past, but you block it out, like you're imagining it. It's in my head. It's not real. So you would you block it all out. But now I'm like, God, I was so spot on with that. That can't be a coincidence.
No.
But it was like I had to get into that zone. It's almost like a meditative. I can't speak. Meditative. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
I have to get into that zone and really kind of connect. I've never had it that I'll be walking past someone and I'm like, oh, I have the urge to go and tell them. But I've realised the older I'm getting, I'm extremely I connect. I'm intuitive to people I first meet. For example, my new job. Another one. So I'm now a general manager of this. It's a place opening up in Dundee. It's called the Manchery. It's like a male grooming salon where
it looks like Peaky Blinders, and you look like there's images of so there's images of Savannah, and I can't remember the lady's name in it, but they've fully given you that amazing look. Honestly, it looks unreal.
So this job, I can't believe I actually managed to get it. It's the first job I've had actually where they absolutely encourage me to be my mad, crazy self. Like, they don't want a watered down Savannah, which is wonderful, because every other job I've had in the past, I've had to water my personality down, but they're like, no, we need that personality. So they've allowed me to be part of the creative process. It's not open yet, but they've allowed me to formulate skincare products for them. They've allowed me to be part of the whole refurbishment of this building. They've really allowed me to get my claws stuck in, which is amazing. But there was a gentleman who, I better watch what I'm saying in case any of them listen to it, but there's a gentleman they hired to kind of oversee a lot of things. And when I instantly met him, I disliked him. And I mean, I disliked him wholeheartedly. I didn't trust him. I thought, oh, you're I just don't like you at all. And it turns out that I was completely right. Everything I foresaw happened.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Every single thing from him, just a lot of things and I foresaw it. I seen it. And that's been happening to me more and more and more. And I think it's because I'm really connecting to that side of me now. I'm listening to my gut. I'm listening to that. And so, yeah, that's basically, it's homing in on it. I think everybody has it in them. I think you just have to trust the process and trust that sometimes you might. I think it's always easier to kind of read people you don't know than people you do, because people you do know, you might want to put your own kind of personal, what you feel about a situation into it. You know what I mean? Whereas if it's a stranger, you just purely go on what you feel. So I've absolutely started trusting that process and trying to connect with spirit. And I'm writing journals. I'm having these mad dreams at the moment, and I'm writing them down. And then I go back a few months later and I'll read them. And I'm like, oh my God, I foresaw that happening in a weird dream. So it is a process. But yeah, sorry, I'm waffling.
No, and actually, this is something we talked about on the spirit work episode, because and it's also like putting out there that if you want to develop it, putting out, like actually saying to spirit, I'm open to seeing this. Like, you can say like, please don't scare me too much or whatever, but it is like putting it out there. I'm willing to open up to this. I'm willing to see this. It is like tracking your dreams. It is listening to those gut feelings. It is like seeing what comes up and having some faith in it. And the more you have faith in it, the more that comes through, because it's really very much something that I've been working on. I was actually going to ask you before I let you go, because honestly, this has all been like gold. One thing I wanted to ask you is, so with the ritual work that you do, like, is there any music, like witchy music or any form of music that you might listen to whilst you were working, any rituals, or that ties in with working with with a Cailleach, or anything you're happy to share on that front?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this is another kind of wee tip for people that are kind of new. And my goodness, a crow has just sat at my window and looking right at me. How bizarre! A bird has just literally sat at my window.
Like, watch what you say, love.
I'm no slagging you off, Cailleach. I promise. I'm being nice.
That's an omen. Where are my boiled sweets? You haven't brought me any out for a while. That's what she's proposing.
Don't worry, I'm going up to the spa with the new. I'll get you some. But with music, I feel music is one of the best things to kind of connect to get you in that zone of for energy work, and for that's kind of what I'd say to anybody new in the craft. Like, when you're casting a circle and when you're doing that, have you ever been at a concert and you're singing your favorite song and everybody there has that feeling? Like, we used to get it in the clubs in the 90s, you feel that kind of that energy. That's kind of the
what when someone does like that.
Here we fucking go.
Like little Gary's like, do you really like it? No, I've got some terrible 90s memories of clubbing, but yeah.
With music and ritual work, I personally believe it gets you in a frame of mind. I tie music with emotions. Like, you'll hear a song from your past and it'll take you back to that exact moment in time.
Yeah.
It can make you cry. There's songs that make me cry for no apparent reason at all, just that I connect with them. There's songs that make you feel empowered, impassioned, and like you could take on the whole world. So with me, I like heavy metal. So when
I knew you was going to say that, yeah.
I listen to, and it doesn't, like, I think a lot of folk think, oh, heavy metal is worship. Sorry, not worship. So it's kind of in conjunction with worshiping the devil and stuff. And it's really not. It's just how it makes me feel. If I'm really, really angry, I will listen to some death metal and I'm like, do the death roar, and I feel brilliant. Or if I'm having a bad day, I will have a car rave. I will go in my car, and I actually got pulled over by the police once because I was swaying all over the road. but I was dancing to Dolly Parton's 9 till 5, but I was dancing while driving, and I got pulled over. They let me off because they thought, what the hell? And I was like, yeah, sorry, I was dancing to Dolly. I've done a breathalyzer, I was totally fine. But yeah, music you connect with. But when I'm doing kind of ritual work, especially with the Cailleach and that ancestral work, I cannot get past listening to like I love the bagpipes, and I know a lot of people. The bagpipes give me goosebumps all over my body. It's like it just makes me feel so patriotic. Like when I see like the pipers walk through the street, and on Games Day when we have like the Highland Games up here, it just honestly it does something to me. So I've been listening to, for when it's with ritual work, I'll listen to music before I kind of get into my ritual work, but then I like to just have absolute silence. But it depends what mood I'm in. Sometimes I'll have my earphones in and kind of stay connected. I like to dance in a circle, like really dance in a circle to create that energy. So I will dance to dance music in a circle, going round, and I totally believe that gives you so much energy in your circle, and it just makes your magic work stronger. If I'm doing healing work, I kind of like to listen to healing, kind of calming music. There's oh gosh, I can't remember her name. I've been listening to, because I'm starting to learn Gaelic, like really start to learn it, because I want to speak Gaelic. I want to know it fluently, and I don't. I mean, I know a few words. I can write it, but the pronunciations are quite hard. So I've been listening to a lot of Gaelic singers, and so I can immerse myself in it. And the music's lovely. It's like Celtic kind of folk music. It's just beautiful. So I'll also listen to, if I want to connect with the element of water, I'll listen to water sound. I just anything to kind of get me connected. So it varies on how I'm feeling, what I'm doing, and who I'm wanting to connect with, or what I want to connect with. But the majority of the time, I'm a hardcore rock and roll metalhead.
I love it. I absolutely and I really resound with the music side of it, because for me, I listen to a lot of like really like like I'll listen to like a lot of like Celtic folk music as well, Norse music. I think it just helps get into that trance state, and it depends who you work with as well. I think it really ties you in with that deity or whatever, because obviously I work with the Morrigan, so I'll listen to a lot of music that I feel is related to her, and it just gets you into that headspace. Definitely, it's really powerful. I think if you are like clairaudient as well, or if like I think then certain things will resonate with you a lot, like music in your craft will be something to really look at.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think the older I'm getting, I am mellowing out a wee bit more with my music taste, and I am appreciating different sounds and music. And oh gosh, I think her name's Catherine something. She's a Gaelic singer in Scotland. And the first time I heard one of her songs, it actually made me cry. And my husband was like, "What are you grating for?" Because I had my earphones. I was like, "It's just so beautiful."
I can relate, honestly. You'll have to let me know who it is, and I'll put a link in the show notes to some of their songs, so we can all have a cry together.
Absolutely. Oh, it's beautiful. She's a beautiful singer. She's got a really nice kind of tone to her voice, and so I've really been listening to a lot of her and kind of Celtic music. When I'm trying to connect to my ancestors and the Cailleach, I am listening to more kind of Scottish folk songs and all the rest of it. I really am. I'm really connecting with that just now. It's kind of taken over my whole life, but I'm happy with that, because it's made me find an inner peace that I never had before, because I'm now, as I'm getting older, I am being true to myself, and I am being unapologetically myself. And I've realized, if people don't like me, that's none of my business, but I'm just going to carry on anyway. It's none of my business if people like me or not. I don't care. I'm going to keep being me. And since I have had that frame of mind, my world's opened up to me. Like, all these good things have happened, because before you'd kind of be like, oh, I better not say that, I might offend, or I better not wear this because folk will think I'm weird. But now I'm like, you know what? Stuff it.
I am going to be exactly who I am. And since I have done that, I've never been happier. And I've never been more content with my life. And I've got a very supportive husband who, he's probably just as daft as me, but he encourages me to absolutely go and do these things. And he's wonderful. He is one. I'm very lucky that way. But I'm just being true to yourself. And it's difficult, especially when you're younger. In my 20s, I would speak out a little bit, but then I would know when to stop. Whereas now I'm kind of like, no, I don't agree with that. And here's why, but without being mean or nasty. You know, and
I think that's exactly the Cailleach energy as well.
Yeah,
like genuinely,
just
there's
a way to
one
say
thing
that.
I think that's what she would want. Like just
Yeah.
to, you know, like be as you are, not worry about what people think, say what you
Yeah.
mean, and live by that rule. Definitely.
100%. Listen to that inner voice in you. Like that's one thing that I've totally taken away from the Cailleach. It's just that inner gut voice is never wrong, never wrong. And if you continuously squash it, then it does stuff to you. It'll affect you mentally, physically. It'll make you ill. But when you start really listening to that inner Cailleach voice, it empowers you. And then little by little, you feel better. You feel energized. You feel powerful. You know, the first time in my life, I actually feel like a strong, powerful woman. I'm not a silly wee lassie anymore. I'm fully embracing the mother crone stage of my life, you know, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's down to connecting with that, with the spirit of the Cailleach. 100%. It's changed me. It's made me stronger.
I think you need a podcast, Savannah. I'd listen to it. Like, I'm not even joking. Honestly, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely amazing. And I've loved, like, honestly, you are one of the most fascinating people I know. Like, you've got so many amazing stories. Like, you know, like so many things you've taught me. And I don't know, I just love your energy. So you definitely need to get a podcast.
You've taught me loads as well. The first ever podcast I listened to yours, I knew instantly. I knew. I was like, me and her are going to be pals. I just knew, and I reached out to you straight away, and I've been stalking you ever since.
No, the feeling's definitely mutual. Honestly, like when we first met, when we first spoke, I was like, this girl. Like, it was honestly absolutely mutual. It was like, just like colliding, and you know, just got on like instantaneously. So 100%. I knew it would be brilliant, you coming on, honestly. But no, I will link in I'll link in the show notes the different bits that Savannah's talked about, like the ritual and so on. But I'm so grateful. So Savannah, thank you for coming on, and I'm sure you'll have to come back on again.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you.